Namaste. All right. Hey guys, Mr. Golis here again, and what I wanted to talk about are two words that people screw up all the time. And part of your education and part of your being in this course is to learn words like these and to use them correctly, because they're the type of thing that people will use interchangeably, and they kind of screw up. And the two words are force and pressure. Okay, and a lot of people think they're the same thing, and they're not. All right, and you'll hear someone will ask you to explain something, or you might ask someone to explain something, and hey, how does this engine work, and what was whatever, and you'll hear someone try and explain and say, well, it's like the force of the pressure inside the engine on the cylinder on the piston, and and it's like whatever. It just sounds dumb. All right, but it doesn't sound dumb, and these words don't sound dumb if you use them correctly. Okay, so let's talk about what they are and what the difference is between them. All right, a force in physics, all right, is something that causes an object to accelerate. In the middle school, and even in the elementary school, and probably even in the ninth grade, you were taught that a force is a push or a pull. Okay, I don't, whatever. Yeah, that's kind of like what we tell little kids, all right? The real explanation for a force is it's something that causes an object to accelerate. That means either speed up, slow down, or turn, which are three things that objects don't do spontaneously. Objects do not speed up by themselves, they don't slow down by themselves, and they don't turn by themselves. That would violate Newton's first law of motion. All right, and in order to get them to do these things, a force is required. Okay, so when your car is moving, all right, if you take your you take your foot off the gas, well, you might say, oh wait, the car slows down by itself. No, it does not. All right, the car is slowing down because there's a lot of air friction between the body of the car and the air. There's also a lot of friction between the tires and the road, and that slows down the car. The car will coast for a while, but eventually will come to a stop because it is forced to stop by the force of friction. When the car is stopped, the car will not spontaneously just start moving. You have to engage the engine, which then uses a combustion process to create a force on the transmission system, and then turn the wheels, and then it's actually the friction between the wheels and the road that forces the car forward and gets it to change from not moving, because it won't spontaneously move by itself. It's actually friction that gets the car moving again. When you engage your brakes, it's the force of friction that slows down and stops the car in that case. So forces are involved in all of those changes of motion. All right. And that's something that you need to know, all right? And forces are measured in, and make sure you got this and make sure you know this. Forces are measured in the metric system. They're measured in something called the newtons, okay? Because you guys are Americans and I'm an American, and we don't really use the metric system that much here. We use it a little bit, but not commonly. I think in terms of force in terms of the English unit, which is a pound. Okay. Your weight is the force of gravity on you. That's why when you step on a scale in America, your weight is measured in pounds. It's actually how much gravity is pulling on you. The bigger you are, the more gravity pulls on you. The smaller you are, the less it pulls on you. All right, so force is measured in pounds. Okay, and you can have bigger forces, or you could have bigger units, like for example, if you're talking about some objects that are really heavy or engines that are really powerful, you might want to use the ton, which is 2,000 pounds, and so on. Like my log splitter develops 12 tons of force. Okay, so the hydraulic arm, it's not the biggest log splitter, but it's not bad either. The hydraulic arm pushes the log up against the wedge with a maximum of 12 tons, or that would be 24,000 pounds of force. Okay, is what it can generate. All right, so that's what a force is. So, and also because you guys are Americans, so you know what a Newton is. A Newton is a unit of force. If you were to compare it to a pound, it's about a quarter of a pound. That's how I think of it. It's not exactly a quarter. It's about there's about 4 newtons in every pound. Okay, so that's how you can think of that. All right, so that's what a force is. Now, pressure is a little bit different, although it's related to a force. Pressure is force spread out over an area. Okay, and there's an equation for pressure, and the equation looks like this. P is equal to, P for pressure is equal to force over area. F for force, A for surface area, like in square feet or square inches or something like that. Okay, and so it's related to force. You need a force to create a pressure, and also a pressure can create a force. Like, for example, when you burn gasoline inside the cylinder of the engine, what winds up happening is the combustion process basically shoots out, the hot gases from the combustion process, create a pressure on the walls of the cylinder, and that pressure translates into a force on the piston, which forces it up or down, or whichever way the piston is. Kind of like almost like shooting a bullet from a gun. In that case, when a gun is fired, the propellant behind the bullet, it basically ignites, creates a bunch of hot gases which rapidly expand, creating a pressure on the walls of the barrel, and or force spread out over the area of the barrel, and the part that can move the most does, and that would be the bullet. All right, so that force, which is part of the pressure, goes into moving the bullet forward. Okay, and that's kind of how it is. But it's related to area. Now, notice area is on the bottom of the fraction. When you have a number on the bottom of a fraction, the way it works is like this. The bigger this number gets, the smaller this number gets. The smaller this number, and works in reverse, the smaller this number gets, the bigger this number gets. So for a given amount of force, you could either have a big or a small pressure for a given amount of force. And I'm doing this from my bedroom here in the summertime, so I don't have a lot of stuff to demonstrate for you, but I kind of got some stuff from the basement to show you. So here's just a 2.5 pound weight from the weight set, all right, one of the small weights and all that. And so when I put this on my hand represents a surface area, okay, and that 2.5 pounds of weight of force is spread out over my hand, and this doesn't really hurt at all. Okay, this is whatever. It's I'm not in any sort of pain from this, that sort of thing. But what if I took this nail punch, all right, and which has a very a small head there, like that, and this is a small surface area. So what if I took that, and I'm not totally going to do this because it's going to hurt me, but I took it and I put that on my hand, on my palm, and then I put the weight on top of it like that, and it's actually starting to hurt right now. That 2.5 pounds of force, which is really not a lot of force, but is now, instead of spread out over the larger surface area of my hand, is now focused on the small surface area of the end of the nail punch, creating a much larger pressure on that part of my palm or my skin, and it starts to hurt. And you can imagine what would happen if that was like not a nail punch, but you did this with like a pin or something like that. If you did that with a tack, that would go right into your palm and stuff. Why? Because you're taking that 2.5 pounds of force, which is not a lot of force, but the surface area goes down that it's applied to, and so the pressure goes up. Okay, and that's how pressure works. All right, now if you want to relieve pressure on something, one of the ways to do it is to increase the area that the force is spread out over, and that's how you lower a pressure on something. Okay, so that's what's going on there. That's why sometimes like smaller cylinders, all right, in cars can actually generate a significant amount of pressure on the inside there rather than a larger cylinder. All right, one of the ways that they started to improve gas mileage in vehicles when, like when I was a kid, vehicles back in the day, vehicles came standard with a V8 engine. There was just a normal engine size for most cars, and my father certainly didn't drive sports cars. It was just an average car with but they had a V8 engine in it. But then gasoline prices went up in the 1970s and became much more expensive, and to drive to work and stuff. So people were demanding smaller vehicles, but they also wanted the same or better performance for less gas mileage. So how they do that? Well, they made smaller engines that are their sort of higher compression engines. And what does that mean? You make the cylinder smaller also. You use a better alloy to withstand the pressure. All right, and so for a given combustion or explosion of gasoline, you could actually generate more pressure inside that cylinder than with a larger cylinder if it's designed the right way. All right, there's a lot of variables involved, but that's like kind of one way like that. Here's another example that I was thinking of. All right, I got out this one of my hunting knives and stuff. This is my buck. All right, and so what does this have to do with force and pressure? Well, the edge of a knife is a very, very small surface area here. So that's why when you want to do a job, you want to have a sharp knife or any sharp tool, sharp axe, whatever it is you're doing. Abraham Lincoln, one of the greatest presidents that we've ever had, said that if he was given 8 hours to chop some wood, he would spend 6 hours sharpening his axe. And the wisdom behind that is because when you have a sharper axe, you don't need as much force to apply to it to chop the wood, all right? Because you're focusing that force on a really, that's what a knife is actually, or any cutting tool. It's a small surface area that you're putting that force on, okay? And what that does is for a given amount of force, the smaller that surface area, like the edge of a knife or a razor, you can produce an enormous amount of pressure on a small little area like that, and thus cut something or get your job done. And I'm not even going to do this. This hurts right now. I'm not gonna let go of my knife here because it's gonna puncture me here. But if you can imagine like taking this, all right, and then putting this on the knife now, all right, where the point of that knife right there makes that area go down even further, and that really will go through something fairly easily. And that's the concept of pressure. Okay, so force is something that causes an object to accelerate. A pressure is a force spread out over a certain amount of area. So it's a combination of force and area together. And I hope I said that right. Yeah, pressure is a force spread out over an area. Okay. All right, so there you have it. Now, let me just talk about what pressure is measured in. Okay. And so pressure is measured in the metric system. That's measured in something called a Pascal. Okay. And what a Pascal would be, it's the amount of pressure you would get. Let's say I had a 1 Newton weight, and I put it on top of a square surface area that is 1 meter on each side. And a Pascal would be the amount of pressure you get on that 1 meter square area if you put a weight of 1 single Newton on it, which is, a Pascal is like really, really small. It's not a lot of pressure at all. Okay. Oftentimes, people who measure pressure in terms of pascals use kilopascals or thousands of pascals at a time, because 1 Pascal is like really, really small. Okay, in America, we tend to use the standard pounds per square inch, or PSI. All right, that's what that is. So pounds per square inch. So that would be the equivalent of, instead of a Newton on a meter, 1 pound weight, okay, over 1 square inch, a square that would be an inch on each side, 1 inch. And that's a pound per square inch. And obviously, you know, most Americans know this because of their tire pressure, all right? My tire pressure on the van out there is 36 psi, all right? That's what it's rated for, and so on and so forth. So that's the deal with that. So again, notice notice even in the units you have square, you have surface area units. A square inch is a measurement of area, so that's indicative of a pressure. By the way, just so you know, and this is kind of good for you guys to know, and I think anybody who has at the very least a high school education, and certainly if they have more than a high school education, should know that air creates a pressure on you. All right, and what we say is that the air at sea level, which we are in Rhode Island, is 14.7 psi. And what does that mean? That means that, okay, so if you took a tube, like a square tube, not a round tube, but a square tube that was 1 inch on each side. So let's say I had like this clear tube and it's 1 inch on each side. And it went from the floor, okay, sea level, all the way up to the edge of space, about 200 miles high. And you weighed the air, the amount of gas that was inside that tube. The amount of air that's in that tube would weigh 14.7 pounds. So what that means is that your body, right, being in the air, okay, there is on every square inch, so if you take a square inch on your hand, on your palm, on your arm, on your face, whatever, on every one of those square inches, there's 14.7 pounds, okay, of weight sitting on that square inch. And you're probably saying like, well, wait, what about, you know, the bottom of my hand? Does that have 14.7 because I could see on the top? Wouldn't the air go down? No, it doesn't work that way with fluids, and that's something that you need to know. The pressure generated by a fluid goes out in all directions. It's something called Pascal's principle, that when you put pressure on a fluid, it transmits that pressure in all directions, including up, including sideways, including at angles. So that's why at sea level, right, I have 14.7 pounds of air on every square inch on the top of my hand, but also on the bottom of my hand too. Okay, and that's something that if we, you know, are together in class or something, I would demonstrate for you more. If you've ever seen like little suction cups, all right, that you use to stick on like a window or a refrigerator to put like a hook on something, like we tend to use those little tiny suction cup things when we're putting up like Halloween decorations or Christmas decorations, because you can kind of stick them to the window like that. All right, you kind of press the air out of it and then it stays on the window. Well, why does it stay on the window? It doesn't have any glue on it. It stays on the window because when you push the air out of it, okay, the air from the outside is actually trying to get in there. It's pressing up against it. And so you have, for even a tiny little suction cup that might be about this big, like an inch around or something like that, you have over 15 pounds, all right, of pressure sitting on that tiny little suction cup. Now this is a 2.5 pound weight, okay? So you can imagine like a decent sized 15 pound plate sitting on that tiny little suction cup, and that's why it sticks to the refrigerator, to it's got to be a smooth surface so that air can't get in there. All right, because once air gets in there, then that 15 pound or 14.7 pounds will press from the outside also, and you won't get any friction. Okay, but that's how that works. Okay, so wanted you to know that. That's the difference between force and pressure. I'm also going to give you like some notes on this too on Google Slides to kind of augment this. And there you have it. Okay, so now you know the difference between force and pressure. Namaste, and goal us out, and enjoy your apocalypse.